Every morning before I rise, I reach for my phone, not out of routine, out of dread. I dread the posts of more innocent lives taken by the regime in my country, Iran. I dread the news that the international community has once again thrown those murdering our people a lifeline. My breath catches as I revisit the chats from those inside Iran that started with, "This might be my last message," wondering, have they survived or have their lives too been taken? Before I go on, I'd like to address what some of you might be thinking. My family name often leads to assumptions, so I'll be absolutely clear. My father's goal and ours as a family is singular: a transition to free and fair elections in which Iranians decide their future. We are not fighting for a throne. We are fighting for freedom for a people who have been denied it for 47 years. I have never set foot in my country. I have never walked its streets, touched its soil, or watched the sun rise over the mountains of the place my family still calls home. This was never my choice. Exile is one of the many punishments this regime has imposed, not only on my family, but on millions of Iranians scattered across the globe. I grew up on my grandmother's stories of Iran. She spoke of a nation with streets full of color, alive with music, art, debate, ambition, and possibility. An Iran that was a pillar of peace, prosperity, and stability for the region, and an ally to the Western world. For many years, those stories felt almost mythical to me, like fragments of a lost civilization. Then, when social media came about, I began to receive messages, hundreds, and then thousands. A direct line was established for the first time between me and the people. Every day, they ask me to be their voice. That is why I'm here, because I owe it to the people of Iran to speak when they have been silenced. Last summer, I stood beside my father in Munich at the Convention of National Unity for Iran. Representatives of all political factions, faiths, and regions gathered to form the broadest coalition of Iranian opposition forces ever assembled, united not by politics, but by a love of Iran and a belief in the sovereignty of its people. Throughout that day, mothers and fathers whose children had been killed by the Islamic Republic approached my father. They looked into his eyes, embraced him, and wept on his shoulder. By the end of the evening, his jacket was soaked with their tears. I have thought about that jacket many times since. That is what 47 years of carrying people's pain looks like. His mission has always been the same: a democratic, secular Iran where power belongs to the people whose tears soaked that jacket. Because what calls itself the Islamic Republic of Iran is not a government. Governments govern. They serve and protect their citizens. The Islamic Republic is an occupying force, exploiting Iranian soil, Iranian resources, and Iranian lives to consolidate its own power and export its ideology. What government turns a nation's clean water into mud in one of the most resource-rich countries on earth? What government drives the exchange rate from 70 rials to 1.5 million to the dollar in 2 generations? What government leaves half a nation below the poverty line while funding militias from Gaza to Yemen? What government builds armies not to protect the people, but to oppress them? All of you know the name Mahsa Amini. You know that 4 years ago, she was beaten to death for showing some of her hair. You know her murder sent millions into the streets. You know the world, for a moment, said her name with Iranians. But then the world moved on. Do you know what came after? That the protests never stopped, they grew. That Iranians took everything the regime threw at them and kept going. That quality of life continued to deteriorate to the point where life no longer felt like life at all. In January, my father called them out once more, peaceful, unarmed, and millions took to the streets, a sea of light ready to overcome the darkness. That was when the regime responded by cutting the internet. They slaughtered more than 40,000 Iranians, one by one, indiscriminately in the dark, in the streets, on their balconies, and even in their homes. They executed the wounded in hospitals. They persecuted the doctors who dared to help them. Melina Asadi was 3 years old when she was killed in her father's arms in Kermanshah. 3 years old. Those who left their homes for the last time on January 8th and 9th died making it absolutely clear. The Islamic Republic has no mandate, no legitimacy, no right to speak for Iran. They died for a future they would not see. They died for freedom. Despite knowing all of this, Norway, the country that awards the Nobel Peace Prize, sent its deputy foreign minister to sit across from their murderers in Tehran on day 75 of a nationwide internet blackout, not to deliver an ultimatum, not to demand accountability, but to offer recognition. When you shake hands with murderers while their victims are silenced in the dark, you do not just abandon those victims, you become complicit in their erasure. At my father's press conference in Berlin, grieving parents stood before 150 members of the international press, broken but brave, representing their murdered children. Not one journalist asked them a single question. They chose to disregard the Iran that was standing right in front of them. Many criticize the war on the Islamic Republic, but what about the war it is waging on its own people? Too many cite confidential regime sources and platform its members, but ignore its victims. What gets reported is the story the regime wants told. When access is the currency, truth becomes the price. This is how people get erased, not only by violence, but by indifference. I want to tell you about Saleh Akbari. She was 38 years old, a nurse, a wife, a mother. During the January uprising, she and her husband opened their home to wounded protesters who were too terrified to go to hospitals. She treated wounds in her kitchen. She hid students in her apartment. One night, regime forces stormed her home. She was shot and killed in front of her child. Even after her death, the cruelty continued. Regime forces sexually assaulted her body and sent images to her husband. Psychological torture designed to break what was left of him. Afterward, their daughter kept asking why her mother's shoes were still by the door. That detail has stayed with me. A little girl waiting. I'm not here to ask you to care. Caring is passive. I'm here to ask you to choose. There is no neutral handshake. You are either standing with 92 million Iranians fighting for freedom, or you are shaking the bloody hands of those murdering them. Many are worried about what comes next, but the path of the revolution is clear. At the people's call, my father and his growing coalition are ready for the transition. The Iran Prosperity Project is a transparent, publicly available roadmap to rebuild Iran. We have done the work. Iran's future is not a hope. It has a plan. The ancient Zoroastrian tradition teaches that the world is held in the eternal struggle between light and darkness, and that every act of courage, however small, is a flame lit against that darkness. Every time you say their names, you light a flame. Every time you refuse to let the world look away, you light a flame. This regime can cut the internet. They can shoot into crowds. They can disappear bodies. But they cannot extinguish 92 million flames, and they cannot silence the people in this room. I have spent my whole life outside Iran, separated from my brothers and sisters inside by a revolution we did not choose. But I will not let our people be separated from the world's conscience. Every morning I reach for that phone, I'm reminded of the bravery of Iranians. Somewhere in Iran tonight, a little girl is still standing at a door, waiting for her mother who is never coming home. Mothers are still holding the body bags. Teenagers still await their executions. Tens of millions of people are still sitting in the dark, wondering if anyone outside even remembers they exist. The question is, will you fight with them? Long live Iran, long live the Iranian people. Thank you.